So, hey guys, I'm here with Dr. Braxton Hunter, the author of Core Facts. So we've just gone through Core Facts. We've made it through to the end. If you've held with us this long, the lessons are all online. But I wanted to sit down with Braxton and ask him some questions from you guys and from just my own queries on how to get into writing and how to get into publishing. But most important thing, Dr. Hunter, kind of introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do and all of that to everybody, so they kind of have a background here.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm excited, whoever you are watching this, that you have interest in Core Facts or went through that class. That's so incredible to me. I wrote that book hoping that it would be used for those sorts of things, and it has been used by a number of small groups, and that's just such a blessing to me. I don't want to write books just so people know who I am. I want to write books. If I write books, I want them to be books that can benefit the kingdom, and so I hope that that's what Core Facts has done for you. I serve as a professor and as the president of Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary in Evansville, Indiana. And we're a 100% online school for people who are wanting to be professional ministry professionals or clergy of some sort, but also people who want to be counselors or apologists or evangelists or missionaries, or even lay persons who have other means of employment but just want to go deeper in the Word. And they can do that from home, just like you're watching this video right now. And so I've been doing that since 2012 in some capacity. And since 2015, I've been president. And what I've seen, I was a pastor before that and an evangelist before that. And what I've seen is that some of these ideas that we call Christian defense or Christian apologetics, that's what that word means, oftentimes it's kept on the top shelf for the people that really like to engage in worldview discussions as a hobby, but it's not presented where people who are just living the Christian life and functioning in various jobs in the community and those sorts of things can grab onto these ideas and use them. And so I wanted to help to remedy that if I could, and one of the ways I did that was by starting a YouTube channel and a podcast. And then another way was to write a book like this one that hopefully people can read and glean some truths from it. I always say about the book that you still have to want to understand it. Apologetics doesn't give itself up so easily, but if you want to understand it, I think anyone can. And so that's why I wrote the book, and that's a little bit about me.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. First question I got to ask is, how do we get a copy of it?
You get a copy of Core Facts by just going to Amazon.com and typing in my name, and there'll be a list of my books there. Or you can just go to my website at BraxtonHunter.com, click on the resources tab, and there is a list of most of my books, if not all of them there, and Core Facts is definitely there.
All right, excellent. So you kind of talked about this earlier, but what was the motivation behind writing Core Facts?
Well, as I said a minute ago, one of the things that bothered me is that, and this was in the early to mid 2000s, was that I was aware of Christian defense, Christian apologetics, but many people in the church were not, and even many pastors were not. And a lot of people don't have a seminary education or even a graduate level education or even a bachelor's degree and in these fields. And so some of the terminology that's used to describe these things presumes that people have prerequisite knowledge about these ideas. And so it wasn't being taught in most churches, and the books that were available were not as readable as I'd like. I mean, you had books like The Case for Christ and things like that, but there just wasn't enough. And so what I thought was, I want people to be able to pick up one book and understand some of the best reasons to believe that there is a God and that Jesus rose from the dead. Because if God exists and God raised Jesus from the dead, Christianity is true, period. It doesn't get you all the interesting doctrines that different denominations want to talk about, but it gets you Christianity. And so I wanted one book that does that, and I felt like I could write that book. And of course, in addition to that, I wrote a fiction series aimed at young adults. And then I did write a more academic book for people who were on that level. But I wanted something that I could put into the hands of church people, that I could put into the hands of people in my family who don't really know anything about systematic theology or Christian apologetics, and they could pick that up and read it and at least be able to have reasonable conversations about it, or have a resource that they could go to for answers if they're talking to someone who is not a believer or someone who is having doubts about the faith. And so that was the goal of writing the book that way. And then the reason I included in the back of the book as an appendix a little written debate that I had with an atheist was because I wanted people to see how this could play out in a real discussion with someone who's not a believer. And so that was my goal. I wanted to put it on the bottom shelf where anybody could pick it up and start using these ideas.
Excellent. All right. So it kind of answers this next question. This one comes from my wife, so I better make sure I get this one asked. What does this book do that other books on apologetics does not do?
Yeah, so in one respect, none of the arguments that are in the book are unique to me. These are ideas that have been presented at one place or other throughout the history of the Christian faith for 2,000 years. Some of the arguments even originate before Jesus came for his earthly ministry, some of the arguments for God. However, the thing about it is, I recognized as a person who was interested in evangelism, reaching others for Christ, and doing pastoral work as a pastor myself, that even if someone could understand these books, like William Lane Craig, for example, who's regarded as probably the world's most recognizable leading apologist today, he has a book that's similar to mine called On Guard, like a fencer might say, On Guard. And it makes things a little more simple. I don't think simple enough. But the problem was I wanted a device. I wanted a literary device or a way of remembering these things. And when I was in the late 90s, a youth pastor, a program, an evangelism program, an outreach program came out called the Faith Soul Winning Program. And you took the word faith, F-A-I-T-H, and each letter stood for something else so that someone could remember when they're talking to someone how to walk them through that evangelism encounter. And so F was for forgiveness. A was for available. This forgiveness is available. I don't remember what the rest of them were. These were I is for impossible. It's impossible to get into heaven without Jesus or something like that. And so you walk through these things and with someone. Well, I wanted something like that someone could remember a simple phrase and then be able to use that as an acrostic or an acronym. And so I came up with core facts, and as readers of the book will know, or who have listened to you about the book will know, that each letter of the phrase core facts stands for a different piece of the case for Christianity. So that's one thing that's different. And a part of that, not to go too deep with this, but a part of that was you run into different people who are not believers. Some people believe in God already. So the word facts in core facts is all about the resurrection of Jesus. So if somebody already believes in God, but just has trouble understanding why we should accept that Jesus is the Son of God or rose from the dead, well, then you can skip the core part of core facts and go for the facts about the resurrection of Jesus. And if someone doesn't believe in God, you can use all the core facts. So I wanted something that was flexible that way. And so that was kind of one of the unique features about this book. I think it was written with a pastoral heart and the heart of an evangelist to make it understandable, and not just understandable, but also memorable and usable in the field of ministry.
Excellent. Thank you. No, it is highly usable. We actually went through part of the appendix in each step to help with the better understanding of how would I actually do this.
Great.
And, so what were some of the biggest helps for you when you were writing the book?
Well, when I was writing the book, I had just finished my PhD dissertation, which I wanted to write on apologetics in general. But as you know, having gone through that process yourself, that's too broad. It's like somebody comes to seminary and they get to the PhD phase and they say, I want to write on the Holy Spirit. Well, that's a pretty big subject. With a dissertation, you want to get very, very specific and go a mile deep and an inch wide. And so my dissertation topic became related to apologetics and how it's used in evangelism in the Southern Baptist Convention. And so that didn't really allow me to talk about the arguments themselves. So after I got done with my dissertation, I went to kind of work on it a little more to make it into a book. And that's the book that's behind you, Evangelistic Apologetics, on the shelf. And so that one's the one that's a little more academic, and several of the things that are in Core Facts are in there as well. But I thought to myself, I want one book that is just the arguments and makes it as simple as I can. So I had already done a lot of the work to put together, some of the best ideas about these arguments and things that I definitely wanted to include. The thing that I had to research a bit more were the best objections that the average person is likely to run into, even if the average person runs into a fairly well-educated, knowledgeable skeptic out there. And so I put a lot into that to add the objections section to each argument. And of course, there's more now that I could put in there. And so at some point I may come out with a second edition, but I think what's there now is sufficient. I don't think many people who are dealing with unbelievers at their work or in their community or in their family are likely to run into many more objections than what you'll find represented in the book. So that was where most of my real study came in. And the resources that I used for that was going straight to the horse's mouth and listening to what atheists have to say and critics of Christianity have to say about these things. And so I read most of the new atheist books that are out there. I read some of the journal articles and things that were out there. And then, of course, a number of YouTube videos, because even though I wouldn't include YouTube videos and atheists that are making YouTube videos in serious research to find out what sort of things the man on the street has to say that our local church people are likely to encounter, I thought that was helpful. So I tried to look to those things and figure out what is it that people are saying most of the time about these. And in the limited space of what I want to be a relatively brief book, what can I include? So most of my research came from looking at what the skeptics have to say, because I had already had 10 to 15 years of looking at the other arguments.
There we go. All right. No, those are excellent. Like I said, this book it's influential, whether people want to agree that the arguments are influential or not. You just did the video on, what's the best argument, and some of them are like, oh, the contingency, oh this, oh that, but in reality, they, giving these answers to people, I watched your talk at New Orleans Baptist, and you said you don't have to be an answer giver, you can be an answer finder.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's important. And for people to know that these answers exist, whether they memorize them or not, they exist and they can know where that resource is. And I think that's important in this. So who've been your biggest influences as an apologist?
Well, I would say that the late Norman Geisler was one of my first big influences. People that are not familiar with his work would benefit greatly from it. Norman Geisler wrote a 4-volume systematic theology that goes through basically all of the major doctrines that we Christians hold to, but he also wrote and was more known for his apologetics books. There's a great little book. Well, it's made for lay people as well. It's not really a little book, but it is readable, and you could read it in a few days, called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, that he wrote with Frank Turek, who's a popular apologist now too. And that's a great book. And so I'd say Norman Geisler was a big influence on me initially. I was fortunate to get to meet him several times, and he came and spoke at our commencement at Trinity several years before he died, and got to have dinner with him a few times. Also, I'd say William Lane Craig. Obviously, he's a big voice in apologetics. And I really connect with the way he thinks and the way he presents things. And I don't always agree with everything that could be said about any of these guys, but in terms of defending the mere Christian message, the truth about the Christian message, the principal truths that we hold, I don't know that Christianity today has a more able defender with a better track record than Dr. Craig. And so I've been blessed to spend time with him as well. And so those are two big ones. I would probably put those at the top of the list. There are others. Obviously, Michael Icona is an influence on me. There have been others that, well, even just on a personal level, Mark Middleberg, who is Lee Strobel's right-hand man. Lee Strobel wrote The Case for Christ. There are a couple of others that are still have gone into various branches of Christianity and moved away from the denominations and the evangelical church that I'm most at home within. I won't mention their names, but there are a lot of great influences out there that have really touched me, and from different angles. And so that's been really powerful and helpful.
Excellent. Make sure. No, I would also say that Bill Craig has been, he's an influence for anybody who wants to get into apologetics. I don't think you can really do this without at least reading his stuff, because his Kalam is, it was groundbreaking when it came out, and it still sits relatively undefeated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and by the way, I could also mention J.P. Moreland, Richard Swinburne, people like this, but also guys that aren't around anymore, like Francis Schaeffer or C.S. Lewis. They had a major, my favorite author is C.S. Lewis. So, there are some classics out there too, even if we don't have to go as far back as Augustine, I always say Augustine. Augustine, who's behind you there, or Aquinas or Anselm. Even if you don't want to go back that far, people that wrote in English and you can read their stuff today who aren't around anymore. Everybody's familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia. And so Lewis is great. Some strange theological ideas, but his apologetic stuff is good.
It's solid. Yeah. All right, so here's the next question is, how many books have you written, and which one's your favorite one?
Oh, well, that's easy. I have 9 books, and my favorite one, now that doesn't mean they're any good. It just means I wrote them, but but my favorite one, I have a copy of it here. Let's see. Yeah. My favorite book is this one, Letters from Ignorantia. And strangely, even though I'm most known for apologetics, that's not an apologetics book, at least not in the most straightforward sense. It's kind of about what it's like to grow up or to be in a society and a nation of people, most of whom think they basically understand what the Bible says when they don't. And even the ones who are supposed to, like church people, have a few scriptures memorized, have a basic understanding, but don't have really an in-depth understanding of the scriptures. And so this was kind of like a letter of chastisement, I guess, to myself and to the church, that we need to know more what the Bible says, lest we be citizens of ignorantia as ignorant people ourselves.
I read that the first week it came out, so I love it.
Awesome.
So, all right, now, that's your favorite book that you've written. What's your favorite book in the field of apologetics that you've read?
Oh, man. I would say probably my favorite book is, it's a thick one, but it's Philosophical Foundations for a Christian Worldview. Now, that book is, and we talked about William Lane Craig and J.P. Moreland, they are the authors of that book. And if that's a book that I would say a person might have that as a reference, but it's not a book you want to read straight through, and it's definitely top shelf type stuff. But if you like apologetics and you start going into apologetics more as an interest in a Christian discipline, this is a book that at some point down the line needs to be on your reading list. And what I love, I don't think it's in the newest edition, although it maybe I have the like an older edition of it, but in the introduction, it's whoever's writing it talks a little bit about the celebration at the Billy Graham Library when it was first opened, and a local government official was speaking there and said, and he said something like, there's been enough preaching already to have won America to Christ. Now, obviously, we don't ever need to stop preaching. We need to be reaching people with the gospel message. The gospel is the power of God unto salvation. But his point was, if we had been able to defend the Bible, defend the Christian message, as well as we are able to preach it to others, then America would have been won to Christ. And that's obviously hyperbole because people still reject the truth. Right. People witness the life of Jesus and reject it. But the idea was, America has been preached to, but America has not been answered when it comes to the objections to the Christian faith as well as it could have been. And so I think that's a good book that somebody ought to get later on as they get to intermediate levels of apologetics interest.
I like that book. And I do have a newer edition. I'll see if it's still in there. All right. So would you change anything about the book? You already mentioned that you would update some of the objections and answers to them. Would you change anything else about the book?
Actually, as you were asking me that question, one thing I thought was I might put really bad objections as a separate category. I don't think I'd call it that, but that's what the section would be. And it would be some of the sorts of objections that I've gotten to certain arguments from really internet atheists and people that really many, not all internet atheists don't know what they're talking about, but a lot of them don't. And so I would have some of those objections in there because people run into them, but I'm really happy with it as it stands. Now, there's minor quibbles, little things I could change that for me would make it slightly like almost not worth talking about, more correct. Like, for example, with the letter C in core, which is the universe has a cause, one of the things that I say that argument gets you to is a spaceless, timeless, omnipotent, omniscient mind, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, if I'm going to be really precise, that argument gets you to a spaceless, timeless, immensely powerful, wise mind. But does it get you to omnipotence and omniscience? I think so, but I would be more meager in the claim. But that's like not a big deal. If it's a mind that, if the cause of the universe is a being that is able to create the entire universe, we might as well call that omnipotent. And if it's wise enough to create the universe and it works, we might as well call that omniscient, even if it doesn't technically get you there all the way with that one argument. So something like that, I consider that a throwaway thing. I have to be aware of those things for my dialogues with atheists, but the average person doesn't have to get that exactly nuanced out. So
that kind of leads into this last question. All right, so you're a president of a seminary, you've written 9 books, and as you said, you've got the debate in the appendix there. You found some time for some high level debates with skeptics and atheists alike, and you've got the hunter's dilemma from Capturing Christianity. So yeah. What is your favorite debate that you've done?
My favorite, I think probably my favorite debate would be the Matt Dillahunty debate, my debate with Matt Dillahunty. I debated Dan Barker this year, who is probably long-standing a more established name among atheists. And we debated the nature of human freedom, which was a more specific debate. But with Matt Dillahunty, it was at Baylor University. So you had this great setting. He is probably the most influential internet atheist out there, because even though there are people with bigger YouTube channels, those people that have those bigger YouTube channels always point to him. And so he has a lot of reach. He's a good debater. Whether he has good arguments or not, he's a good debater. He knows how to debate. And we had a great topic. It was presented to me, do you want to debate, does God exist? And I said, no, I want to debate, does the Christian God exist? Because, I've debated, I've casually discussed whether God exists. But the thing about it is, I'm an apologist. That's how people think of me. But I am first and foremost an evangelist. if I consider the station in life that I think God has led me to, it's where Ephesians 4:11 lists out different positions or offices or callings, however you want to phrase that. And one of them is pastor, one's apostle, one's teacher. One of them is evangelist. And I believe myself to be an evangelist. My goal, my life's desire is to see people come to know the Lord Jesus Christ for the first time. And the only reason I'm an apologist is in service to that greater goal of being an evangelist. And so as a result of that, I don't want to just talk about does some God exist? I want to talk about does my God exist? Does the Christian God exist? Because I want Matt Dillahunty and everyone else who doesn't believe to accept that Jesus is king and be a part of his kingdom. And so the scope of that debate, the things we talked about, it was fun. The questions from the audience were great. And really, I've done several debates. There are things about each debate that I kind of afterwards, you play Monday morning quarterback and you think, well, I could have said that differently, or I wish I'd included this, or I wish I hadn't said that. But with that debate, there's nothing I would correct. I'm very happy with how that debate went. So I don't credit myself with that. I credit God with that. And so I'm really pleased with that one. So that'd probably be my favorite.
Excellent. Now that's kind of the big one, because that went on right before you went to Ireland. Or right afterwards. I remember because I was turning in chapter 4 of my dissertation to you when you did that.
Yeah.
And then chapter 5 was shortly thereafter, and then you guys did the NASA one, the Spaceman one episode the week that I came up for my defense.
Oh,
so I actually
okay.
remember because I was listening to it on my way up, on my way there, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty good."
Well, good. Well, that's
drive
awesome.
from Connecticut to Indiana. So.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
not everybody was Zoom capable back then.
That's right.
But,
that's right.
So, well, I thank you very much for taking the time to just answer some questions, and I thank you for giving us the resource to be able to use and to be able to kind of just share with people why I have such a passion for apologetics. And like I said, it's opened some people's eyes to the need for it. As the quote goes, you can't spell evangelism without apologetics in the 21st century. So
that's right. I agree 100%. And I want to reiterate something that you quoted me on. We have a T-shirt that says this because I'm so passionate about it. But right after this Zoom call, even if you're a person who hasn't even read the book or heard anything about the book we're talking about, you can be a Christian apologist right now, because even if you can't yet be an answer giver, you can be an answer finder, because you can now go to either of us, or you can go to the book, or you can, you know where to go for the answers. When someone asks you a question, you can start a conversation with someone who doesn't believe. And if they ask you something you don't know, just say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out, and come back and we'll continue talking about it. I think a lot of people are afraid to talk to unbelievers or people that wear the title atheist or something, because they think I may say the wrong thing. You don't have to worry about that if you're willing to say, I just don't know, but I'm going to go find out. And you can go find out. And so I think every one of you can be an apologist in that sense right now, today, and I hope that you will.
Excellent. Thank you. So thank you very much for being here, Dr. Hunter, and I appreciate your time, and enjoy, and good luck on the new school year, because I know you guys are starting up now. So
that's right.
Thank you very much, and have a great day, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.